We begin tonight with a developing story out of Prince George's County Public Schools. Well, School Superintendent Dr. William Height disputes charges that administrators willfully violated federal compensation laws. A U.S. Labor Department investigation led to charges that the school system illegally lowered the wages of more than 1,000 foreign educators. Many of them came to the country from the Philippines on an H-1B work visa. The distinction requires the employer to pay visa fees. The school system is ordered to pay nearly $6 million in back wages and fines. Meanwhile, an immigration attorney with Casa de Maryland says wage theft is the most common type of employer infraction upon immigrant workers.
The workers are entitled to be paid at the prevailing wage, which is a number that DOL comes up with as a result of localized surveys for each job. And it's the average of what people earn in that position in that particular location, not the lowest or the highest, but the average. So they're entitled to be paid the prevailing wage. And with regard to the filing fees, there's certain filing fees that by law and regulation have to be paid by the employer. And
in an official statement, the school system says it acted in good faith and plans to appeal. Well, an attorney representing Filipino teachers in Prince George's County is now joining us in the studio. Arneta Valera is also the executive director of the Migrant Heritage Commission, a cultural group based in Fairfax County that also offers pro bono legal service. Well, first off, let's talk about who the complainants are. Tell us about this case a little bit.
Well, those complaining here are basically 90% of them are Filipino teachers, numbering more or less about 500. But there are also teachers who are not part of the umbrella organization called PEN, or the Philippine Educators Network. So roughly 500 or even more than 500 teachers.
And I understand that for the last 6 months that the Labor Department as well as the school system were trying to reach an agreement. Were you taking part in that, and did you represent any of the clients? No,
we don't. This is an investigation which was precipitated by a complaint of one of the teachers who is being assessed of the filing fees, which obviously under the H-1B regulations is supposedly to be shouldered by the school system. The filing fees for H-1Bs, including the typical $500 fraud detection fee. Now, when they actively recruited teachers way back in 2004, traveling thousands of miles to Manila, so specifically, they know that this obligation is part of the H-1B regulation, because what happens here is that the teachers ended up paying the filing fees. Now, we have represented some clients, for example, where we properly advise these teachers, if you're paying this, be sure and make sure that you actively seek reimbursement for these fees. But Prince George's County started, of course, paying the fraud detection fees and reimburse the teachers. But what is important here is for the system itself to make sure that this type of H-1B visas, they follow the rules and regulations relative to the payment of filing fees.
So this all began with one teacher and has expanded. So you're saying many of them have not been reimbursed or were not told about reimbursement?
Well, my understanding is that they started reimbursing after the Department of Labor called their attention, and most likely you're talking initially about hundred thousands of dollars or even close to $1 million relative to some fees available. But another issue here to be raised is, are there other fees, extra fees paid outside of these filing fees? But of course, our main concern only right now is H-1B violations, because what we want from the perspective of public interest is there an unholy alliance between the recruiter and those who recruit them from the Philippines? So because this has an impact on migration, because you're talking of the sending country and the receiving countries, and we are in the United States and we cannot allow the laws of this country to be violated and at the same time you become part of that violation.
And that's an interesting point that you bring up. What is the proper process for an employer who wants to hire a worker under this type of visa?
Well, for H-1B visas, this is a temporary visa, which has a limit of 6 years. But mind you that an H-1B visa, every person petitioned has an immigrant intent, and the system knows that. So when you file that, they call that H-1B petition under an I-129 form. So initially, these teachers are given 3 years non-immigrant visa. So they are filed here in the United States, and because the teachers are all in the Philippines, there is a consular processing. So they pass through the U.S. Embassy for interview after the H-1B has been approved here in the United States. And then they enter the U.S. on H-1B.
Last week, we reported that the school system was intending to possibly lay off many teachers. Many of them are Filipino, as well as some of the other teachers who are immigrants. Does this in any way, in your mind, relate to the Labor Department's ruling here?
Oh, yes, this is directly related because this is a question of fairness. This is a question of prima facie discrimination. Why are you singling out now the international teachers? You know, we don't mind that the reason is budget reduction or there is an issue relative to H-1B, but you cannot single out the international teachers and tell them that we'll let you go. Because the objective criteria for non-renewal and non-dismissal should be work performance, seniority, and tenureship. And this is precisely why many teachers are maintaining why were they called on 3 separate sessions, all of them. So they should have called all the teachers and tell them, hey, those performing below par, we will not renew your contract. You cannot be saying, we're calling all the Filipino teachers, we will let you go because you're H-1 visa holder. H-1 visa holders are legal workers in the United States.
We're running out of time, but very briefly, just tell me, these teachers came over here, many of them have PhDs, I understand?
Many of them have master's degrees, have PhDs. Some of them are even principals or heads of their schools, even superintendents, so they are overqualified. And the direct correlation with the benefits that they have given to Prince George's County school system, you know, the scores and the achievements tests can prove that in 2010, you know, basically they improve a lot.
All right, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about this issue in the future.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Valera.